Thank you, Stephen. My name is Tom Kirkpatrick, and I am an alcoholic. And first, I want to say it's great to be back in Kingsport again, even though it's just virtually. I left Kingsport, I think 59 years ago, and my family and I really enjoyed Kingsport. I lived there 3 years. We really enjoyed everything about Kingsport. In fact, I'm going to surprise a couple of you by telling you that we bought our first house in Kingsport. We had never owned a home before, and we paid less than $7,000 for a 3-bedroom brick home. This is 1959 now. Only one bath, so don't get too excited if you know what I mean. But that's how prices have changed. I don't know what homes go for in Kingsport, but you can't find one like that. I remember coming to Kingsport. I had came into AA in Des Plaines, Illinois. I was in the United States Air Force, and I had over 4 good years of good solid AA, and just an outstanding group. And I had a tremendous sponsor, and I did everything they told me to do. And I did those things that they suggest that you do if you want to be successful in this program. And then I got transferred from Kingsport, from Des Plaines to Kingsport in the Air Force. And it was different back in those days. We didn't have cell phones or anything like that. And we sure did not use long distance to find out something, because it cost 10 cents a minute. And, it really added up when you figured you could buy a house for $7,000, 10 cents a minute meant something, We didn't waste our money that way. Wasted it on booze when we were drinking. But I was really apprehensive coming down to Kingsport. I was worried. Did they have an AA group? I did not know. I was not. So when I got down there, as we were looking for a house and trying to get located, I sneaked a peek in the yellow pages of the book, and there on the first line in bold letters was AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and a number. And so when I got a chance, I called it, and it was an answering service, and they said, we'll have somebody call you back. And I said, well, I don't have a phone. So do they have meetings here? I don't need to talk to anybody right now. And she told me, yes, they have meetings. And she told me when on Market Street. And I said, well, I'll be there. I'll go there. And I was still a little bit apprehensive because I didn't know what I was going to get into. And I went down on Market Street in Kingsport, and it was a meeting upstairs on the second floor, and it had an outside entrance that you could walk up. And there were big, wide, long steps all the way up to that second floor. And it seemed like you walked forever before you got to the second floor, because I think those rooms down below were about 14 feet high. I'm not for sure, but you got up there, and it was a big room when I first got there, a nice large room. And they had just a great group of AA people. They were just outstanding people. And for you people who live in Kingsport, I'm going to mention a few names. And I just can't remember everybody. My mind don't hold up anymore. And I've been into so many different locations, I get people mixed up. But Boots Duke, who founded AA, and I think for you people who are not aware of Boots Duke, I think it's one of the most wonderful stories in the world about starting an AA group. Boots Duke drove 90 miles once a week, each way, 90 miles there and 90 miles back, down a highway we call Bloody 11W. They didn't have interstate then. And you can just guess why they called it Bloody 11W. And he did that for 3 years, I understand. I wasn't around, but I'm told he did that about 3 years, and he finally got enough of people to start a group. And toward the end, I think he had 1 or 2 people who were riding down the Knoxville with him the last 2 or 3 months, and they started a group in Kingsport. And I found out another surprise. I was up in Murfreesboro at the AA archives about Archives for Tennessee, about 6 or 7 years ago. And I was giving them a donation, not money, but a book that they didn't have. And when I was in that I guess the outer place, the office place, you know, they had this book that was or something that was under this glass cover. You know, they protect that material so you don't bother them. And then big in bold letters it said Alcoholics Anonymous in Tennessee, 1945. There were AA groups in Memphis, Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, and Kingsport. And that was all. But that kind of surprised me. I didn't know that Kingsport went back to 1945, but I never questioned or anything like that, but I guess they did. And so that tells you a little bit about Kingsport, Tennessee, and their interest and action in Alcoholics Anonymous. They're good people, really good at, God, it was good AA in Kingsport. And I'm so grateful for that group. And they must have done something right, because I had a little over 4 years sobriety when I got to Kingsport. I was stationed there for 3 years. I left after 3 years. I had 7 years when I left. And so they must have done some good for me, because I've been sober now for 65 years. And so some good came out of Kingsport. You know, I don't know what it was, but I'm grateful for it. Now, after I've got all of that junk out of the way, let's go to what we're here for. My sobriety date is August 14, 1955. I was 27 years old when I came into AA, and I've had continuous sobriety one day at a time from then until now. Presently, I am 92 years old. So if you just use a little bit of simple arithmetic, you can find out that I've been in AA 65 years. And a fellow there, which people ask all the time, God, I don't understand how you could stay sober for 65 years. Well, it's just, you do it the same way you stay sober for 5 years, or 10 years, or 15, or 20, or 25, or 30 years. You do it one day at a time. Let me tell you something else that's very interesting. When I came into AA, there was only one man in all of Alcoholics Anonymous all over the world. Only one person had 20 years sobriety, and that was Bill W. Now, you look around now and you see, God, people with 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years sobriety. So it's not unusual for people to have long periods of sobriety. And if they are like me, the only place that I could get the sobriety, that I could get sober and maintain and attain that sobriety, was in Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I'm originally from Knoxville, Tennessee, right out of Knoxville. I'm the second oldest of 7 children. Our father was a drunk. He was not called an alcoholic. He was called a drunk or a drunken bum. But he was, a full-blown alcoholic, but they didn't call them alcoholics in those days. And our family really experienced the ravages, I guess is a way to put it, of what happens to a family when the breadwinner is an alcoholic, active alcoholic. You find out, just lots of things happen to you. You get kicked out of your house. There's no money for Christmas. You're hungry a lot of things like that. And of the 7 children, I am the only one who's an alcoholic. None of the other, my 6 brothers and sisters were alcoholics. There's only one. I only have my baby sister, who's 76 years old now, is the only one that's left besides me. And I went in the military when I was 16 years old. And, during the last year of World War II, I was, wanting to help win the war and all that other stuff. I was patriotic, and I lied a little bit and got in. And when I came back from overseas in 1945, I was in the Army, infantry. They transferred me to the Army Air Force. Now, the Army Air Force at that time was part of the Army. The Air Force was not a separate branch of the service. And I liked the Army Air Force, and I reenlisted. And I stayed in it, and I had 10 years in the Air Force when I came into AA, and I stayed in 11 more years and retired in 1966 with 21 years service. And I have drawn a retirement check, for 54 years ever since then. So it paid off that way. I took my first drink solely because I wanted to be one of the boys, for no other reason. They were all going down to Denver. I was stationed at Murray Field, going down to Denver and to a Brown's Palace. The bar in the Brown's Palace is supposed to be beautiful and all that stuff. And I wanted to be one of them, so I went down there and we all ordered. There's four of us. We ordered a beer, and I just gurgled mine down. I didn't like it, didn't dislike it, didn't think it was great, didn't think it was awful. I just gurgled it down, and I watched these other guys sitting around there laughing and joking and maybe taking a little sip of beer once in a while. And I said, "Hey, let's get another beer." "Oh no, we're not ready yet." And about just 5 minutes later, I said, "Let's get another beer." And they said, "If you want one, go up to the bar and get one." So I went up to the bar and got another beer, And I did that 3 or 4 times while we were there. And of course, I got drunk. The first time I ingested alcohol into my system, I got drunk. About 2 or 3 weeks later, I did the same thing. I got drunk. I didn't intend on getting drunk. I intended drinking a little. And then I was transferred to Mississippi, Kingsport Field, Mississippi, which is at Biloxi. And I didn't drink any for 4 or 5 months, I guess, and got myself squared away and settled. And then I started going down into Biloxi. Boy, every time I went to Biloxi, I got loaded to the gills. And most of the time I got arrested for something, public intoxication, drunken disorderly or something. Got thrown in the drunk tank. And the way they would handle people then, if you were military, and when they found out you were military, they just wanted you off the street. And when the APs would come around, the MPs would come around, they'd transfer you over to the MPs, and they took you out to the drunk tank at the stockade. And the first time it happened to me, next morning I woke up and I said, found out where I was at. And I said, "Oh my God, I'm in trouble." And about 9 o'clock, I thought surely that he would report me and my commanding officer would get all over me or something would happen to me. But about 9 o'clock, the guy called out 8 or 10 names and said, "You people stay here. The rest of you can all go back to your squadron. Be sure and clean up your awful and all that stuff." And so I found out a good free way to get a ride back to the base every day. And I drank regularly on the weekend at Kingsport, and then I got promoted to buck sergeant and joined the NCO club and started drinking on Wednesday night too. And then I later got transferred to Alaska, and they sent me out on the Aleutian chain to Shemya, which is an island, the next to the last island in the Aleutians. It's 27 miles east of Adak, which is the last island. And the military built a huge hospital there for the invasion of Japan. So I know they were going to invade Japan because we had a hospital there. It was the closest location, American occupied location in 1943 when they built that huge hospital. But anyway, I developed a habit of getting up in the morning, taking a shower, putting on clean uniform, going to the mess hall meeting, going to the orderly room where I worked. I was payroll clerk. I could do that payroll in my sleep, I came from Kingsport where I had 300 and something people on the payroll and had all kinds of changes, and to Shemya where I had less than 100 and no changes. Nobody had separate rations or anything like that. And I could have done it in sleep. And I developed a habit of as soon as I could, I went over to the club, the NCO club. It didn't open up till about 3:30 or 4, but if you got there a little early, he'd start giving you some beer, And I actually stayed drunk the 16 months I was there. I sobered up, and I'd ride the last bus, what they call the last bus back from the NCO club to the compound where we lived in, which was the hospital they built, and somebody would help me get in my sack and all that stuff, and I'd wake up the next morning and go to that routine. And then when I got back to the States, I had, even when I was coming across the country on the train, I was afraid, well, boy, I'll run out of booze. What am I going to do? And so bought 4/5 of old granddad. I remember this, and I was going to put it in my duffel bag. And I said, wait a minute, if I throw it in my duffel bag, it'll get broken. Besides, I'm going to check my duffel bag, and that's how we think. And so I had to scurry around and find a little handbag that those 4/5 in my little overnight bag fit in just purposely. And I started drinking as soon as I got on the train, and pretty soon I had another GI come up, and he started to help me drink my booze. And the conductor came. It was a one of those streamline trains, they called them in those days. And the conductor warned me 2 or 3 times that he'd have to put me off the train if I didn't behave a little bit. And I didn't think he would do it, but he put me off the train in Kearney, Nebraska at about 6 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. And I gave the rest of my booze. I had about almost 2/5 of whiskey left. I gave it to that guy because I thought he would need it, and I told him I could get some. I couldn't get any not even from a taxi driver. Nebraska was dry. Kearney was dry. And so I got on the train the next night, that Sunday night, and got on into Chicago, hit a bar, got loaded to the gills, then wound up in a hotel room, got a hotel close to a real nice dump, close to the train station. And then I knew I had to sober up because my mother had never seen me drink. She didn't even know I drank. And she put up with my father, who was an alcoholic for a long time before she finally had to divorce him. And she raised 7 children by herself. And so she was a saint to me. She's still a saint, And I said, well, I've got to sober up. I can't go home like this. And so I stayed in a hotel 2 nights in Chicago, not drinking. And then I caught a train on down to Knoxville. And I got to Knoxville. I said, God, I can't go home like this. I'm still shaking. And then I said, well, I've got to get some uniforms cleaned and some other things. And so I got another hotel room and stayed there 3 more days. And I was still shaking a little bit, but I hid it fairly well, went home, and nothing was ever said or anything. But I think that the good Lord, or my higher power, was looking out after me right then when I was home on leave. Because the last thing the last thing that I ever needed was a wife, And I just met this beautiful young lady in Knoxville, Tennessee, really Fountain City, Tennessee. And 11 days after I met her, we got married. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me. We were married for 63 years. And when she passed away a little over 7.5 years ago, and God, she was just a perfect woman. She wasn't an alcoholic, but she sure supported this program. And when I came in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, we made a pledge, or our number one priority was sobriety, because we recognized that we didn't have anything if we didn't have sobriety, not as a marriage or anything else. Anyway, let's get, and I continued drinking, but I recognized early that my drinking was different from other people. And I tried to change my drinking pattern like so many people do, and had about the same success that most of us alcoholics do when we change our drinking patterns, absolutely none. But that never bothered me because I knew I could quit drinking anytime I wanted to. And so things got worse and worse with my drinking. So I finally made a decision to quit drinking. Well, this one morning, I had a hangover, of course. And I said, I'm not going to drink anymore. This is it. I will not ever take another drink. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was drunk. Now, I don't know what caused me to take a drink, but what happens to me, a person like me who has this disease of alcoholism, is once we intake alcohol in our system, we lose control. Me, I go ape, after I take a drink. And no control, I just go ape. And so for 3 years, I really tried to quit drinking. And about a year before I came into AA, I said, well, I recognize I'm not having any luck quitting drinking. I thought I was going to wind up on Skid Row. I didn't worry about dying or anything like that. And So I had made a list of about 7 or 8 things I had to try to see if they could help me quit drinking. And of course, the first one was religion, the church. Boy, that was a real loser, for quitting drinking, if you want to know. Another one was the Salvation Army. They were very sympathetic, and I kind of liked their attitude, but they had an in-house program, and I was in the military, and I couldn't do that. Another one I tried was a counselor. God, I went to a counselor. A recommended counselor by a friend of mine who said he was a good counselor. What a loser he was. I could counsel better than he could, as far as helping somebody quit drinking. He's a real loser. So then I had a couple other things. I don't know what they were, but the last on my list was Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, well, hell, they can't help me either. And I just put them off and put them off and put them off. But then I got on this 3-day drunk, and then I had a blackout almost all three days. A friend of mine told me all about everything, so I know I had a blackout. And I had blackouts frequently, and I told my wife that morning, or I got home on Sunday morning. I'd been home for 3 days, and I thought she would raise hell with me, but she was just so sweet and nice. And oh, how are you? I got him on the belt. She was so wonderful. You know what I mean? And you need a bath, you want something to eat, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, that night I told her, I said, I got to do something. I said, maybe I might want to call that AA business. And then the next morning we talked some more, and I said, I think I'm calling AA. And she said, well, I'm not going to talk to him. You've got to talk to him. And so I called the central office in Chicago. And some guy, some volunteer answered the phone. And I told him I thought I might have a problem with drinking, and could he help me? And he said to me right then, well, I don't know, it's up to you. And I almost hung up right then. He told me it's up to me. Hell, I've been trying to quit. I couldn't, but I didn't hang up. I talked to him a while, and he said, look, I'll send a couple of guys out to see you. So he sent some 12 steppers out to see me. And they came out 2 days, 2 nights, stayed 2 or 3 hours. I can't remember much what they said. I don't remember anything they said. And then they came and took me to an AA meeting on Thursday night. And Des Plaines at that time, and I don't know what they do now. I'm sure it's not the same. The meetings were rotated among the members' homes. And if you couldn't have a meeting, it was okay. They didn't mind at all, until you could have one. And I was in the program about 9 or 10 months before I had a meeting in my home, But anyway, the meetings would last about, from 2.5 to 3 hours, but they took about a 15-minute break after about an hour and a half or 2 hours. They had coffee and sweet rolls and stuff like that. But there was still meeting was still going on, but they didn't call it the meeting then. But whenever they got a new person, and I was a new person, each person would take 5, 10, or 15 minutes and tell what he used to be like, what happened to him, and what he was like now. And I didn't even hear the first 2 guys that spoke, but the third guy that spoke, I had noticed him before the meeting. He was a heavyset guy, what I'm going to say, not a rugged face. I don't know what word I want to use, but I had noticed before the meeting how jolly he was and how friendly he was and all that stuff to everybody, not just to me, but to everybody. And when he started talking, and I actually thought I was the worst drunk in the world at that time. I had categorized myself the same as my father, a drunken bum, That's what I was when I called AA, a drunken bum. And when that guy started, I thought I was the worst drunk in the world. And when that guy started talking, I was listening to him. And he started telling his stories. And the depths that he had sunk to in this disease of alcoholism was absolutely unbelievable. I couldn't hardly believe them. There were so many things. And here he was now. He had been in the program 7 years. He had got his family back, which he had lost. He was a successful businessman, and he was happier than a pig, and you know what? I just knew he was happy. So I listened to all the rest of the guys in the group after that. Every one of them were much worse drunk than me. And every one of them was happy. There were about 10 or 11 guys, I think 11 guys in that room. and all of them were happy except one, and that was me. And then after they finished telling their stories, they read the first step to me and asked me what I thought about it. And I said, I don't know. And so then each one told their experience with the first step and what they believed and how they handled the first step. And I'm grateful for that because that really helped me understand that I was an alcoholic. It helped me to understand that my life was unmanageable. It helped me to understand that was a basic tenet of this program, to understand that you are an alcoholic or that you have a problem with alcohol and you want to do something about it. Then they told me that if you will do what we tell you to do, you won't have to drink anymore. And what's more, in a short period of time, you will lose that compulsion to drink. And I thought they were crazy in hell. There's no way I'd had it for, a few years now. I had to drink. Just drink, But I did what they said. I went to a lot of meetings, and I got just the greatest sponsor that ever existed, that ever lived. I hope you think your sponsor was the greatest person that ever lived. But he really helped me. He really guided me. I needed a lot of guidance. I was DUMB. I didn't know nothing. I had to learn a tremendous new not alphabet. Oh God, I can't think of it. See, I can't think of certain words. It's right here in my mind, but I can't think of it. New vocabulary. I had to learn new vocabulary because I didn't even know what alcoholism was. I didn't know what sobriety was. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I had the sponsor who worked with me, and I was anti-God. I was not an atheist or anything like that, but I had dealt and bargained with God so much in my drinking that I had quit, broke off the relationship that I had with him. Because when I did get out of the mess I was asking to help me with, I didn't thank him for it or anything, but when I didn't get out of it, I blamed him, But my sponsor helped me with this God business, the higher power business, and I'm so grateful for that. So I went to just a meeting every day. I went to a meeting, sometimes 2 times a meeting, 2 times a day. And I just began to just absolutely couldn't wait to go to a meeting. It was just that dynamic or that exciting to me, because this sobriety was something that I had not experienced before. It's something that I really felt wonderful about. There is nothing more wonderful in this world than sobriety. Sobriety is the most wonderful thing in the world. And so I was a good AA member. So I moved around the country because I was in the military. I went from Des Plaines to Kingsport, from Kingsport to Alaska, from Alaska to North Florida, from North Florida to Tallahassee, from Tallahassee to Vandenberg, California, Vandenberg Air Force Base. Then I retired and moved back to Knoxville and a group in Knoxville. And then I went to Columbus, Ohio. And there was a group up in Columbus, Ohio. From there, I went back to California. And then from there, I went to Nevada. So I was in groups every place. As soon as I got my family settled, I contacted AA and I was not the most active AA member, but I was a good AA member. And the one person that really helped me a great deal in Kingsport, did I mention these names about, I guess Brooks Duke and Graham Porterfield, and I did before the meeting, I know, but they were members of the group in Kingsport. And Ed Barrett was a person, when I came to Kingsport, had just had another slip. I guess it was his second or third slip, He had, and I found out he lived close to me. So I moved out of Seaver Edition. I don't know where that exists or not. It's out toward the old 9-hole golf course. I don't know where that exists anymore or not in Kingsport. But Ed and I got together, and I became Ed's sponsor, and Ed got sober, and he stayed sober till he died. I know he stayed sober till he died because after we left Kingsport, Rose buried his wife, and my wife corresponded, and she finally told us Ed had passed away, and then we found out that Rose had passed away when we were sending them a Christmas card, or at least one Christmas card we sent them, and their daughter sent the Christmas card back and told us that Rose had died, and she gave us her address, and she was over in Colonial Heights, not Colonial Heights, I think, is it Colonial Heights in Kingsport? I don't know. Shake your head. Are there? Okay, that's where she lived. Anyway, we buy Christmas cards for about 15 or 20 years until we didn't get a response anymore. We quit sending cards to her. So I've been in a lot of different places, and I have just such a strong belief about this program. I know what I need for it to work for me. Now I know that's not what other people need for it to work for them, but for the individuals who have been what's a good word I want to use? Successful, I guess, really successful in this program. And by successful, I mean sobriety, total sobriety, just worked the program, worked it very well, had loads of happiness, all good things happened to them. Then I believe in that. I believe that. And I believe that you need a new person. All you new people, find yourself a good sponsor. A good sponsor is not somebody who agrees with you. A good sponsor is somebody that tells you what you need to know when you need to know it. And a person that will guide you in the direction that you need to go and will help you with your steps, because you need some help with your steps. You're like me, you're dumb. You don't know nothing. You know what I mean? I hate to imply that other people are dumb, but I was pretty dumb, and I needed a lot of help. And you need somebody guiding you through these steps. You really do. Let me tell you what happens to me after I was sober. But I was in the Air Force still, and because I was sober, I was able to take advantage of opportunities. And the Air Force had a lot of educational programs. Now, when I was in Kingsport, I had an 8th grade education. That's what I had, 8th grade education. But through this Air Force programs, I was really got in a program called Operation Bootstrap. And that was when you got within 2 semesters, or in my case, 2 quarters, because I was going to Florida State University and they were on a quarter system. They sent me down to campus. That was my job. They sent me temporary duty down there. My job was to finish up my degree. And the Air Force, paid me my salary and all that stuff while I was going to school. I believe they even paid my tuition. I don't think they bought my books. I believe they did pay my tuition. And I got a bachelor's degree in personnel management from Florida State University. And whenever I retired from the Air Force, I knew that I had a skill that the Air Force had taught me with computers, not the kind of computers you're thinking about, but large mainframe computers, IBM 235s, those kind of computers, which require special language to get into them and a special technique to get that language into the computers, and it tells them what you want it to do. And I had that skill, and I knew that community colleges all over the country were looking for people to teach that. And I had done a slight bit of teaching in the Air Force, not much, but a little bit. So when I retired, I came back to Knoxville, Tennessee, which is my home, and I went to the University of Tennessee, and I earned a master's degree, a Master of Arts in College Teaching. And after that, I got a job as with a community college in North Florida. I went down and got a job. When I was finishing up my degree, they offered me the job. Normally, they send you back and they'll say, we'll let you know, but they offered me the job right there. And I kind of took it right there. I told them I had to talk to my wife, but I was pretty sure I'd take it. So I come back and we agreed to go. But about a week or so after I agreed to take that job, I got a letter from Ohio State University. I better call it the Ohio State University because, they get a little upset if you don't call it the Ohio State like it's the only university in the world. No, it is good university. Don't get me wrong. I got a letter from them asking me if I'd like to come up there and work on a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy, and be a research associate in the National Center for Research in Vocational and Technical Education. And I told my wife I didn't want to do it. I said, we've been nomads long enough. I've got a good job. It's good income. It's more money than I ever made. We can really live good down in North Florida. It was a community college between Tallahassee and Jacksonville. And I've got a good wife. She said, Tom, you better go on up to Ohio State because you'll never get another chance like that. And she said, I'll stay here. And Tom, our oldest son, was then finishing high school. And by the way, he went to first grade in Sullivan County there, not in Kingsport, but Sullivan County. I guess Kingsport has better schools, or at least you claim you do. I don't know. Some discuss probably do. So I went on up to Ohio State, and boy, they got terrific AA up there. You better watch it when you get up there because you'll almost believe them that they invented Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, they're so enthused about AA having started in Akron and all that stuff. And so they got terrific group in Columbus. And I went up there and I finished and earned a PhD from Ohio State University. Then I taught at Southern Illinois University for 3 years. Then I got a job at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and I taught there almost 20 years. I was a professor. I was department chairman there for 8 years. Now you got to remember, this is a drunk that's doing that. He may be a drunk, but he's a sober drunk, but he's doing this. And he's also a person that just had an 8th grade education when AA got him. You know, he was just a bum before that. Is my time up? Stephen, is my time up?
Oh, you've got about 5, maybe 5 to 7, 8 minutes if you want, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll finish it up. I just want you to realize that here's a guy who's a professor at a major state, one of the largest state universities in the state, a department chairman for 8 years of the almost 20 years he was there. And he has to give Alcoholics Anonymous all the credit for that. Well, I'll give my wife some credit too, but AA and my wife is responsible for it. But let me tell you something else. I never even give the history of AA or anything else about AA a thought when I first came into AA. I only thought about my own sobriety. And I really didn't start thinking about the history of AA till I got into AA up in Columbus and a lot of reasons. And then I realized, well, you got a pretty good background with people who were pioneers in this program. And let me tell you why. My sponsor is Ed Burns, Ed B. He had 10 years, he came in 1945, and he had 10 years sobriety when he became my sponsor. His sponsor was Earl Treat. Earl Treat had 8 years sobriety. He came in AA in 1937. He had 8 years sobriety when he became Ed's sponsor. Earl Treat's sponsor came in AA in 1945. He had 2 years of sobriety when he became Earl Treat's sponsor. Earl Treat's sponsor was Dr. Bob, co-founder of AA. So my grand sponsor, if you know what grand sponsors are, is Earl Treat, and his sponsor is Dr. Bob. So I've got that kind of connection to the early days. I met 4 of the original 100 members of AA. And I knew Earl Treat is the only one I really knew well, and I knew him well because of my sponsor used to take me over this place over 2 or 3 times a year and try to infuse a little good AA into me, if you know what I'm talking about. And Earl's story is in the big book. It's on page 258. And I encourage people to read it. He's got a good story, don't get me wrong. And he talks about coming down. But the really, really interesting thing about Earl's story is that whenever Dr. Bob began to work the steps with Earl, the Big Book hadn't been written and the 12 steps hadn't been developed. And Dr. Bob used a 6-step program, and Earl outlines that 6-step program in his story on page 258. And if you read Earl's story, I say, go to the next story, 269, I guess it is. It's called Keys to the Kingdom by Sylvia. Sylvia was a pioneer woman in Alcoholics Anonymous. She describes the condition of alcoholism just about as well as anybody I have ever heard in her story. She also describes the difficulty of breaking that cycle of becoming sober. And the only way she did it is her doctor got an advance copy of the Big Book before it was published. And she stayed up all night and read it. And then she asked, could she talk to somebody in AA? And they sent her, Mr. T came to see her. You'll see that, read that in her story. Mr. T is her retreat. Her sponsor is the same sponsor as my sponsor's sponsor, you know. And I heard Sylvia speak in I don't know where it was, 1957 or 1958, one of those years. We used to have a speakers meeting in Evanston, Illinois, the last Tuesday of every month. And they rented a hotel, you know, one of those hotels you could expand the room if you had more people and all that stuff. And they used to have, about 400 or 500 people there in the meeting. And I went right after I came into A not long, and it just blew my mind. I didn't think there was that many people that were sober in the whole world. And here was a whole big room full, you know, of sober alcoholics. And it just blew my mind. And when I heard Sylvia speak, she was the first female woman I ever heard talk. She's almost the first female woman I ever saw in AA, because there was not any females in AA, or they were sparse if they were there. You know, there's not hardly any of them. And she had just a marvelous story, and I listened to it. And not only is her story in the Big Book on page 259 a good story, it's inspirational. Her last couple of pages are just inspirational. It talks about how the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has given her the keys to the kingdom. And I'll turn right around and tell you, I'll give you the keys to the kingdom the same way that she gives them to other people, you know. And if you will do what this Big Book says about working the steps, take the suggestions. Not only was I a professor at university, about 2 years after I retired when I was 65, retired from university, I became a member of the Board of Regents in the state of Nevada. The Board of Regents is that board that oversees all of public higher education in the state. There's community colleges, the state colleges, the universities, the research institutions, the medical school, the nursing schools, the law schools and all that. They oversee all of those. They make the decisions about programs or approved programs. They hire and fire presidents, and we did hire and fire some. We did fire one, at least while I was on the board. I was on the board 6 years. But I was just thinking about that. There again, here I am, a dumb old hillbilly from Tennessee, a drunk, you know, but a drunk who's sober, sitting on a board that overseeing education for the whole state. Now, how does that happen? It only happens if you are fortunate like me, and you got into AA, and you got sober, and you paid attention to what you were doing, and you took advantage of opportunities. All you young people who are coming into AA, you can just do about anything you want to if you first pay attention to the major thing that you need to do, and that is to pay attention to your drink, to your sobriety, and work this program. And if you work this program, things will happen to you. You'll begin to change. You'll become a different person. I did. I am not the same person as I was when I was drinking. I'm a totally different person. And then you will, if you're sober, you'll be able to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. And us older folks, you know, our time has come and gone. But we get young people in AA now, really, really young people. And by the way, Next week, you've got another guy who's on your flyer. He's listed that he's from Henderson, Nevada. Now you think, well, how in the world do you get, and I'm from Henderson, Nevada on that flyer. You think, how do you get two guys from a little old bird, Henderson in Nevada, speaking on our program? Henderson, Nevada, the population of Henderson, Nevada is almost 400,000. So it's bigger than Knoxville. It's bigger than Chattanooga population-wise. And you've got a guy coming in next week that he is just something else. He has sponsored about as many people as anyone I've ever seen in the program. You got Kenny Thompson here tonight watching this movie. He's Kenny's sponsor. And boy, Kenny will tell you how great and wonderful he is. But I don't believe you, Kenny. You ain't that wonderful. Anyway, thank you people very much for putting up with me. And I hope that I might have said something that will help a new person. Or, oh, I did have to mention one thing. I'm not a very good example of an AA member, but I am a good example of this. You can come into Alcoholics Anonymous. You can not drink. You can have a long life, a happy long life, if you embrace this program. And I'm an example of that. Anyway, thank you, Stephen, for inviting me. By the way, Stephen bird dogged me. I don't know where you people know what bird dog means. You know, that's a military term. Make sure that I was ready, and you set me up, God, a couple of months ago, didn't you, Stephen? Do you set up all these people? Wave your head. You set up all these people?
They all came out to hear you, Tom.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'll shut up.